So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where the Warsaw Pact comes back to the modern day. Now the Warsaw Pact was the equivalent of NATO back during the Cold War, except it was its enemy. It was mostly ran by the Soviet Union, just as NATO was mostly ran by the United States, and together they were just the attack one, attack all alliances of that time period. However, as we know, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and with that the Warsaw Pact was dissolved. A lot of former Warsaw Pact countries such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and the Baltic states all ended up joining NATO in the future, and the strongest country coming out of the Soviet Union, aka Russia, would later create a new kind of, shell of the Warsaw Pact known as the CSTO, which includes Russia itself, Belarus, Armenia, Kazakhstan, and who else? It was Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. I don't know how I forgot those two. But today we're gonna go ahead and take a look at a scenario where this whole alliance comes back to the modern day, and all the countries that were in it are in it again, and that includes all former Soviet countries. If you guys do enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is greatly appreciated. And let's go ahead and jump straight into the scenario. So in the red here, if you haven't guessed already, we have the Warsaw Pact, and this thing is pretty big. It's a pretty big alliance. It rivals NATO, and also it rivaled NATO back in the day. Now I have chose to left Albania with NATO, and that's simply because they were kind of iffy on the whole Warsaw Pact thing. They weren't really friendly with the Soviets, so I think it would be better if they just stayed with NATO. But anyway, with the Warsaw Pact coming back, we're going to assume that all of these NATO countries that were put into it are pro-Warsaw Pact now. We're not going to assume that their government still supports NATO. That would just lead to them breaking away and rejoining NATO, and we don't want that for this video. But now this is a pretty strong organization. It's rivaling NATO now, and NATO lost some pretty big countries like Poland and Romania. With this in mind, they are going to automatically start to seek to expand once again, because the threat of Russian expansion is once again right on their doorstep. It's the other way around now, if you even want to call it that. So here we have NATO all colored in. Now note, the Warsaw Pact and NATO are not at war at this time. I just simply colored them in with their respective colors. NATO blue, the Warsaw Pact was red. That's just, I think that's common knowledge, because you know, communism red and then NATO democracy blue. Yeah, you guys get it, right? But they are all colored now, so we can see the contrast. And as I said, these are two very large organizations that have a lot of beef with each other, and that can easily be depicted here based on how split up Europe is now. But like I said, NATO is now going to look to expand, and as we know in real life right now, Sweden is currently in the process of joining NATO, and I believe just now, as I'm recording this video, Turkey has finally agreed to ratify Sweden. They haven't done it yet, but I think they have agreed in principle to do it, meaning that Sweden will soon be joining NATO, just like Finland did a couple months ago. So we can automatically go ahead and color them in. I think that's pretty common knowledge. There's nothing that would really hold them back in this scenario, especially now that Turkey is almost surrounded on all sides. I feel like they would become a lot more NATO friendly, because they have been kind of a stick in the mud for NATO the past couple of months. As for other European countries, I think Austria finally breaks their neutrality and joins it. I think that's just kind of, they have to. I mean, Czechia and Slovakia and Hungary all went to the Warsaw Pact. That is a lot on their border. They don't want to be, ending up with the Russians. We also have Ireland joining. Also, it's a neutral country, but I think that's more of just I'm sticking with this side of Europe, because this really looks like a Europe where you can't just not pick a side, except unless you're Switzerland. Switzerland will always be able to not pick a side. However, everyone else most likely will have to. Anyway, I'm going to leave these three countries here alone for now, and we're going to go touch up on some other parts of the world, specifically over here in Asia, where the Warsaw Pact is going to have a lot of fun. First off, Mongolia is bullied into joining, and we have Iran joining with their free will. From here, the Warsaw Pact is going to do something a little bit ironic. They're going to invade Iraq. Now remember, like I said, NATO is blue. That doesn't mean they're at war with the Warsaw Pact, it's just their color, whereas this scenario right here, the Warsaw Pact is at war with Iraq, so don't think this is a big war just yet. But they're going to invade Iraq in order to seize control of oil, and also to flip its government into favor of the Warsaw Pact. Now Iraq would most likely be a neutral country in this scenario due to their history. It hasn't necessarily been the nicest of histories, especially considering the US and other Western countries, but also considering some Eastern countries. But nonetheless, they're going to fall to Iran in this war, and let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. Alright, looking here, we can see that Iran seized control of some land areas, but they also mainly just flipped the government over to Warsaw Pact friendly, and with this, the Warsaw Pact has expanded down south into the Middle East, even more so from Iran. Now at this point, it's looking like a new world order is afoot, because the Warsaw Pact is huge. I mean, it's very big. Even if I zoom out all the way to here, it's very big. So NATO is going to go ahead and change their philosophy. Instead of being solely Northern Atlantic faced, they're going to go ahead and expand to the world. So any country in the world is allowed to join as long as each member ratifies them. Almost immediately, Japan and South Korea are going to apply for membership, and almost immediately they are going to be accepted, as no NATO countries really have any big issues with these two. Taiwan is also going to apply, but obviously that's going to be a little bit difficult to accept, with the Philippines joining, as well as Australia and New Zealand. And we have Israel applying for membership. Now this is going to be interesting because a lot of countries have mixed opinions on Israel, and especially the whole Palestine situation which is taking place there right now. Turkey is probably going to be against it, and maybe some other southern European countries, but other Western countries, especially like the West ones, like you have a Western country, but you also have like a West country. Like a Western country is Italy, but a West country is like France or the United States or the UK. Other than that, no other countries are looking to join NATO at this time because they don't really see the Warsaw Pact as big as a threat to them, even if they are on their border. Kuwait is having an issue. Like they're scared right now. They don't know what to do because, I mean, obviously if they get invaded, they're done, but they don't necessarily want to join NATO because of like popularity of NATO in the country isn't too high. They don't want to join the Warsaw Pact because, well, it's the Warsaw Pact. So they're just going to cross their fingers and hope for the best. All right, so I'm going to cut the crap now. Obviously, if the Warsaw Pact came back in real life, a war would break out almost immediately. Like, there's no doubt about it that NATO would somehow justify this into being an attack on them, seeming as Poland is seemingly flipped over to the Warsaw Pact side. So as we have Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo joining in on NATO, we have Serbia joining the Warsaw Pact, and that is going to go ahead and start this war. Now, Kosovo is an interesting area or country depending on how you determine it. Me personally, I see it as more of a country, but that's my personal opinion. I'm also not from Serbia or Kosovo, meaning that my opinion, I guess, is less validated. But if you don't view it as a country, then you don't view it as a country. If you do view it as a country, then you view it as a country. I'm not going to get into it, but Serbia claims Kosovo as a part of their territory, and by Kosovo joining NATO, Serbia is going to justify that as a NATO invasion of Serbia, meaning that this red and blue color nonsense is official. The Warsaw Pact and NATO are now at war. Realistically, I think this would happen. If the Warsaw Pact suddenly out of nowhere came back and took all the countries that were once in it and put them in the Warsaw Pact, I think NATO would have to end up going to war with it just because of the overlapping territory. Now, if they didn't overlap, I'd see it more as a Cold War again, where each country, or I guess each alliance, tries to add as many countries as possible, and you know, there's a lot of standoffs, like in Berlin when the US and the Soviets had that one standoff. I forget what it was called, but yeah, I think it would just be like that. I think there would be a lot of proxy wars happening all across the world, and it would just basically be a more beefed up Cold War, which might actually lead into a world war. But let's go ahead and start this war. So immediately the Warsaw Pact is going on offense. They were more ready for this than NATO was because NATO was attempting to make a peaceful approach. However, that peaceful approach didn't really go as planned, and now we have Warsaw Pact troops going through the Balkans and obliterating these countries. Now, these are the weaker countries of NATO, if not the weakest countries in NATO, aside from like Luxembourg and maybe Belgium, maybe Denmark, Slovenia. I don't know. I'm not looking at the power rankings here, but these guys are easy to go through, whereas other countries like Greece, Turkey, even Croatia, Austria, those are harder to go through due to either their military presence or geography. Now, I know that there are some geographical features here that are maybe challenging, but we're ignoring it. I like to ignore geography sometimes. It's even on some of my merch. Speaking of merch, go buy my merch. I haven't promoted it since 100k, but you know, we can still do that. Bosnia and Herzegovina is just a mess. So it's kind of like split between pro-Serbians and then pro-non-Serbians. In this case, they just fall. I mean, I could just sink it into the ocean, but I think we're past that, right, guys? Now, who am I kidding? Sink it into the ocean. It's gone. But the Warsaw Pact has a field day going through these weaker European countries until they meet the border of Austria, where they ease in and manage to take Vienna. However, NATO's army is there to stop the advance, and we have a stalemate over here in central-ish Europe. Now, up in Germany, however, we do have a little bit of a push out, but that is also eventually stopped as Germany is guarding Berlin with their life. Up in Finland, nothing happens because it's always going to be stalemate no matter what, and no matter what universe it is, Russia will never successfully be able to invade Finland and vice versa. This is the canon event for Finland. Down here in the Caucasus/Middle East area, we have Turkey standing little to no chance in being able to stop a full-on invasion. Now, they will be able to stalemate it eventually. However, for now, they are kind of out of luck. Now, this is also geographically challenging to invade. We're once again going to ignore that. Up here, we have Bulgaria and other Warsaw Pact troops invading into the panhandle of Greece and over here into Thrace. They are stopped at the gates of Istanbul, however, and then we have a little bit of a stalemate. So, the Warsaw Pact has successfully been managed to go ahead and push relatively far. I mean, they didn't really capture any notable countries. Like, the biggest gain they have right now is on Turkey, and it's not even that valuable of a part of Turkey. Over here in Asia, it's a little bit of a different story, as all of these countries are rounding up their troops to send over to Japan, and from there they invade Sakhalin, which is probably their best move. Now, the Russians most likely are not worried about this at all. I mean, they're going to be worried about it because if you the world is round, so it's like this, right? These, I can't point, I'm stupid. This area is right next to this area, but I just can't depict that on a map. The US very well and probably will send troops over to this part of Russia, whether it be up here in Siberia, which is unlikely, or down here near China, where there actually is some valuable stuff. We have the navies of these blue team countries successfully taking out some of these islands. They even make a landing over here in southern Siberia. However, it's a very little push as there's no real purpose in invading this area. They then make a landing over here in eastern Russia, which is where they want to be. You know, this is the more populated area of this side of Russia. It's also a lot more valuable. So they managed to invade this with little to no resistance. I mean, there is resistance, but it's nowhere near as much resistance as they would get over here in Eastern Europe. So the war has been ongoing for a couple of weeks now, and this is what we have so far. But NATO has been able to hold its own over here in Europe. Usually in these videos I have them getting steamrolled and then they unsteamroll themselves. However, here we're going to make it a little bit realistic. I mean, of course, the Warsaw Pact would most likely have a little bit of an ease or an edge on NATO at first, and then NATO would push back a little bit, and then the Warsaw Pact a little bit, and then it would just become a stalemate. And that's what I've kind of depicted here. And then over here, I think this is likely. I don't think the Russians are too worried about this region. Sure, Mongolia would be sending their troops here because they have nothing better to do, but I mean, it's Mongolia. Let's not like overestimate Mongolia here. Surely they didn't have one of the largest empires in history, right? Anyway, over here in Turkey, they're finally going to be able to push back the red team as they take back Thrice for themselves. And instead of helping Greece, they're going to go ahead and worry about this front over here. Very Turkish thing to do. I mean, you can't really blame them though. It's their country and they're not really worried about another country right now, even if it is Greece, like their best friend ever, right? NATO is going to go ahead and make a counteroffensive over here up against Poland in order to kind of relieve Berlin of any stress, and from here they're going to start their first ever invasion of Eastern Europe, this time going into Poland and Czechia. Now they managed to capture Prague, which isn't going to wipe the country out of the war just yet because there's a lot of troops here. And up north they're going to focus on the Polish coast because, as we can see, NATO has supremacy. Well, I don't want to say complete supremacy, but they have a majority of supremacy over the Baltic Sea. Also Russia, their navy is mostly down here more so than it is up here because this is not a safe place to go in real life. Like the real life NATO map looks something like this. The Baltic Sea is completely NATO, so you don't want to go there. I mean, technically you still can. You just got to be careful and you're probably going to get bullied around a little bit. But anyway, back to this war. They managed to take a lot of Poland's coast and northern areas, but they're going to stop their advance here in order to kind of give themselves a logistical break and also to fortify a front line in order to stop any counter offensive that the Soviets may have. And I know I just called them the Soviets, but you know, technically it is the Soviets, but whatever. Down south here in Greece, we have the red team pushing a little bit further down. Though they don't get as far as they'd like to because Greece is going to put up a pretty solid defense. But nonetheless, Athens is sort of threatened. I mean, technically every capital is threatened because of long-range missile systems, but you know, you can kind of get some stuff up in here and that would be a lot more deadly than some of that long range stuff, unless it's an ICBM, and in that case it's deadly no matter what. Eventually we have the Russians and Ukrainians working together to make a naval invasion of northern Turkey. Now this was very hellish to make, as you know, the Turks are going to defend this area a lot more than they would this area due to the fact that Ankara is like right there, I want to say. So while this invasion technically is a success, it sustains a lot of casualties for the red team, and Turkey eventually manages to hold their own, although they do start to lose ground over here on the eastern front. Over in Austria, we have the red team making some gains as they head over towards the Alpine Mountains. Now, we're not going to ignore the Alps here because they're too notorious to ignore now. Of course, I've probably ignored some other notorious mountain ranges, but it's the Alps. Like, come on. So the red team is stopped at the Alps, but that does not stop them from going up into Bavaria, and hence relieving some of this front line over here in Czechia and taking back some land from the blue team. Now at this point, the red team does have a pretty solid foothold over a lot of Europe. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, 7 and a quarter, something like that under their control. But they've also lost, like, I want to say half of a country. So what's that, like 7.5? I don't know, I forgot the number. I think I have dementia. Anyway, technically the Warsaw Pact has the higher war score, if you will, and if they were to sit down in a peace treaty, they'd be able to take more land from NATO than NATO would be able to take from them, and they know that, and they're going to be smart about this, and they're going to go ahead and continue to invade. You thought I was going to end the video there, fool. The red team is now going to go ahead and set a line for a huge counteroffensive, which they're going to carry out right now. It goes extremely well in Czechia. However, up in Poland, we know that NATO fortified their front line and this counteroffensive barely scratches it. To make things worse, NATO also just made a little bit of a naval invasion of Estonia and Latvia, and this goes extremely well. They managed to capture the entire Baltic Sea, whatever this is right here. Probably going to be like the Bay of Latvia or the Bay of Estonia, something like that. That's my guess. Or maybe the Gulf. I don't know. What's the difference between a bay and a gulf? Like, this is considered a bay, right? But then this is considered a gulf. Then this is considered a bay. This is considered a bay. So like, what is the difference? I guess a gulf. Wait, no, what? I don't know. It's the same thing in my world. So they captured whatever the big gulf thing is. Bengal. I don't know. And from here, they are very close to capturing the entire Baltic coast, and the Soviets don't want this to happen, so they're going to prevent that from happening. And the way they do this is by fortifying these areas right here and also pushing back up against this naval landing, and that goes pretty well. Back down south here, we have Turkey kicking out the naval invasion and also pushing back up against this. I'm not sure how they're doing this, but they'd most likely have help from other European countries. But finally, we're going to go ahead and get a turning point in this war, because as of now, it's been pretty stalemated. We have Brazil joining NATO, as well as Colombia and even Mexico. Now, this might have had something to do with the US kind of twisting some arms here, or maybe making some secret deals, but we have 3 of the stronger Latin American countries joining in on NATO and helping out the NATO countries in fighting back the Warsaw Pact. Now, remember, the world was also very diverse during the Cold War. Latin America was firmly under the control of the US, except for Cuba and except for some of these guys and except for maybe this guy. But yeah, it's not really too hard to guess that they would also still be against a new Warsaw Pact, in which case they are in this scenario. So these guys once again are helping out NATO. Now with this, Venezuela is going to go ahead and join the Warsaw Pact, but realistically, we all know how that's going to go. It's going to go something like that. And I think Cuba might be smart enough to not do anything stupid. I think they're more aligned with China than they are with Russia, so they would have no business in this war. And then China itself, I don't think they care for this war. Like, I think in real life, China's more of a I'm alone kind of country, and then Russia's just kind of there. That's how the relationship goes. But if Taiwan were to join NATO, then I think they would get involved. But Taiwan isn't allowed to join NATO, so they don't have to worry. We also see Saudi Arabia and the UAE join in on NATO, and as well as finally Israel. Now this would probably create some tension between Israel and Saudi Arabia and even the UAE, but facing a larger threat, I think they could put their differences aside. Now as for the Warsaw Pact here, I don't know who else they would add. Maybe Syria and maybe Lebanon, but even Lebanon, I don't think so, because of Israel joining, and Lebanon has some experience fighting against Israel. Maybe I don't know who else would want to join this. I don't think there's a lot of countries that actively would support the Warsaw Pact. Now, I know there's a lot of countries that actively don't support NATO, but it's the Warsaw Pact, right? The Soviets are bad guys, right? Because they lost history. The West won that part of history, deeming the Soviets the bad guys. That's how history works, by the way. The winners write history. Anyway, with a lot of new help here, and just the fact that the Warsaw Pact is greatly outnumbered, we have the red team pretty much collapsing over here in the Middle East, as the new blue team countries are easily able to push into these undefended territories and take them out. Now Saudi Arabia eventually gets over into Iran, and at this point Iran is going to go ahead and pull their troops from Turkey in order to help themselves out at home. Syria, who just joined this war, realized they made a mistake, as Israel comes crashing in from the south, Turkey in from the north, and Saudi Arabia in from the east. Latin American troops are soon sent to Europe in order to help out, and their help is very drastic. I was thinking of a word there. They managed to hit back all of Czechia and half of Poland, and at this point, the Warsaw Pact is kind of getting smacked. Additionally, over here in the east, we have the blue team making yet another move, this time the move over towards Mongolia and the western part of Russia. They meet up with this lake, which I'm gonna Google the name of. I know it, I just forgot it. So let's big lake in Russia. What is it?
Lake Baikal.
Lake Baikal, yeah, that's what it was. So they reach over to that lake, and from here they're just gonna focus on taking Mongolia out of the war, which means capturing their capital, which there really isn't too much happening over here, so they easily managed to kind of push down and capture that. Not a lot of, is that their capital is there, right? Yeah, I might have missed it just a little bit. It's over here sort of, but they take that out, and essentially Mongolia I don't think they're gonna capitulate, but I also don't think they're just gonna keep fighting. I don't know. Mongolia is a very empty country, if you didn't know. But from here, the West is once again going to go ahead and shoot across this area of Central Asia, and now are going over towards Kazakhstan. Now this is where it gets a little bit more difficult, because doing things like spearheading across the country is really only doable when there's no defense. As we know, there's really no defense over here in Eastern Russia or Mongolia. However, in Central Asia, these countries are a lot more sophisticated and a lot more protected, meaning that just shooting across to their capitals isn't going to work. So slowly but surely, the West starts to kind of just, I guess, expand upon their area gained over here. They go ahead and make a deal with China, so China doesn't become China and starts to invade them. You know, as we know in the Korean War, the West got all the way up to the top part of North Korea, but then China joined the war in fear of that they would get invaded, and then we have this monstrosity right here now. So yeah, they don't want that to happen again, so they go ahead and sign a non-aggression pact with them. And yeah, so Russia here, they are being kind of, I mean, this could very well turn into a threat, so they're kind of threatened by this, so they ease up a little bit on their offense over here, specifically in Turkey as well as in Greece. And at this point in the war, they think they should probably just leave. Yeah, they're not going to win this war in the long run, so their philosophy is to get out while you can. So looking at this peace treaty here, it is fairly just not eventful. We have Serbia annexing all of Montenegro and Kosovo, and that's because they already annexed those areas during the war. But in exchange for that, we have Turkey annexing Syria. Now, in terms of valuable land, I don't want to say that these guys are more valuable than Syria, but Syria is kind of a barren wasteland right now due to the civil war and due to outside foreign powers kind of messing it up. But yeah, I don't think NATO has much value in these, and I don't think the Warsaw Pact has much value in this, so that's why they traded that off. But additionally, for the last part of this, Japan is happy because they have Sakhalin and these islands back. Kareli Islands. I said it. I know I'm correct. I might end my life. I said Kareli again. I meant Karel. I'm never going to be able to get it right. So we're officially changing these guys' name to the Kareli Islands, even though they're known as the Karel Islands. That's just because of me. Me personally, don't like it. You know, I always call it the wrong name. So I'm going to send something to the UN basically saying that, hey, change the name to the Karel Islands, or Kareli Islands. And I guess Russia is probably going to have to accept that because I am him. Anyway, taking a look at the alliance map, I think that a few countries would end up leaving NATO and the Warsaw Pact, specifically Venezuela. Actually, Venezuela would probably lose some land. I didn't draw that in, but you guys can imagine that. I think Brazil, I think Colombia, I think they're out. I don't think they have a point. Same with Venezuela. I think Mexico is also out. I don't see Saudi Arabia and the UAE sticking around. Israel could probably stick around. I think these guys are all fine. They're probably staying. And then with the Warsaw Pact, I think Mongolia is out. And I also think, well, they lost Syria. But I also think like it would start to fall apart. And, you know, Czechia would probably leave and end up joining NATO. And then that's just due to the fact that NATO had a long stronghold over Czechia during the war. And, you know, when you kind of hold on to a place for a long time, your values start to get kind of inputted into those areas. And yeah, so Czechia would probably end up leaving. Maybe parts of Western Poland would start to rebel against other Poland and end up joining NATO or something like that. We can have like an East and West Poland. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's video. So if you guys did enjoy it, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All of the support is once again greatly appreciated. Also, what was I going to say? Oh, join the Discord server. I haven't promoted the Discord server in a long time, and that's for a good reason. It's not very fun to be there. However, we need more people to be there because we are doing a country RP sort of thing. We have our own government thing that we run. There's like a parliament, there's governors, we have a country map of the fictional country, stuff like that. So if you guys are interested in that kind of stuff, feel free to join it. And then yeah, there's also like political parties and stuff, so you can check those out and join whichever one you want. But yeah, just trying to promote the server because it's been kind of like the same people and over again, and it's good to get some new faces in there. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Link to the Discord server in the description. Forgot to say that. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you guys next time. And of course, thank you to all the super fans. This includes Patrick Clauser, Yo Moma Moma, Texan Cowboy Cheese, Kylie Speaks Plays, Poland Country Ball, Dimitri, DW Cool Dude, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Yakko, Soviet Ball, and Serminator. Once again, thank you guys.